This is Steve from Canada.
Hi there, Steve Kaufmann here, again to talk about language learning.
And Steve speaks how many languages? And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how he did it so that you can learn his method and maybe even steal it for yourself. And a quick hint, the really good stuff comes at the end, so make sure you stick around. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Ollie Richards, and this channel is all about helping you learn a new language quickly through the power of stories, so you can become fluent faster and live your best life. But Steve, I want to know, just who are you?
I am a person who likes languages.
More details, please, Steve.
For most of my career, initially 7 years, I was a Canadian diplomat, and then I was in the forest industry, initially working for large corporations, and then set up my own company, which I still have in the trade of wood products. Along the way, I learned a bunch of languages, both as a diplomat and while working in the wood business, because I was in Japan and all that kind of stuff. And then in the last, say, 15 years, I have been very interested in learning languages. I've learned more languages in the last 15 years than I learned up to the age of 60.
Let's start with the idea that Steve learned more languages after the age of 60 than before. See, when I look at friends of mine who speak lots of languages and continue to learn languages, I often see two phases. Like phase number one is this intense early language experience, early in life, like getting a few languages to a really good level, followed by more prolific language learning later in life, kind of more for fun. And this is the case with Steve. And when I make these breakdown videos, I often wonder, for you, what is more useful to learn from? Is it these intense early life experiences, which are best for getting to a really good level, but quite hard to replicate for the average person, because it often involves going abroad, very intense immersion? Or is it these later, more prolific language learning experiences, which are often kind of less impressive level-wise, but they're actually very useful for someone who's at home thinking, well, how do I just learn a language myself from home? And I'm not sure I have the answer to that question, but let's explore both.
I grew up in Montreal. Montreal in the 50s was like 1 million English speakers, 2 million French speakers. They didn't communicate much. We had French at school, much like, Spanish instruction in the United States or French instruction across most of Canada even today. The kids don't learn very much. But for whatever reason, and I think I had a professor at McGill University who had this course in French civilization, and he just turned me on. The best thing a teacher can do is to stimulate and motivate a learner. And once the learner is motivated, there's no holding the learner back. So I got keen on French. I watched, in those days, the movies, La Nouvelle Vague. Then I ended up going off to France, where I studied for 3 years at Sciences Po in Paris. And so I got totally into being French, And once you discover that you can convert yourself, you can become a fluent speaker of another language. A lot of people have never had that experience, so they don't believe they can do it. But once I did that, I knew I could do it.
So this is the pivotal early experience that I always look for. And in Steve's case, this is learning French at university with a really inspirational teacher, followed by 3 years at the Institute of Political Studies in Paris. So there's your fluent French for you. Not to make light of it, but when you are 18 and you're passionate about a language and you've got the chance to study in France for 3 years, it's predictable enough.
And then I joined the Canadian government as a diplomat, and Canada was getting ready to recognize the People's Republic of China, and they wanted someone to go to Hong Kong to learn Mandarin, and I said, I'm your man, because I was confident I can do it, and I think other people maybe didn't know if they could learn Chinese. And then I lived in Japan. So along the way, and so I had opportunities, I had confidence, I felt that I knew how to do it. And obviously if it's a challenge, every new language is a challenge, but where you have a challenge that you think you can cope with, that's very motivating.
We need someone to go to Hong Kong to learn Mandarin. No problem. When do we start? So remember that despite growing up in Montreal, Steve didn't get French for free. He had to study and work hard for it. And it's the fact that he had to work for it that would have given him the confidence to jump at this opportunity to go to Hong Kong. And in language learning, it's very much the case that confidence begets confidence, especially when you get opportunities like this. It really is. There's no doubt that it's a fantastic opportunity to do what Steve did. And I know there will be a lot of people screaming at this video saying, well, I wish I had opportunities like this. Just like when I published my video about how Mormons learn languages, I got hundreds of comments saying, well, I would do anything just to go to the MTC to learn a language with them. So yes, Steve got a series of lucky breaks early in his career. But then again, you make your own luck. in this world, and if he hadn't worked hard to learn French in the first place, he might not have had the confidence to jump on this chance to learn Chinese. Just like if I don't ask you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, then there's always a risk that you might forget to do so. So you know what to do.
When I think back on it now, the main thing was the motivation. And that's the big story. But I needed to be very much motivated because it was a lot of work. I had to learn characters, I had to learn the tones, and I was motivated by my interest in the culture.
So once again, the opportunity is only half the battle. Take a moment to appreciate how hard he worked here to learn Chinese. This is what dedication looks like. And often I see people on YouTube and Reddit getting all het up about, what's the best app? What flashcard deck should I use? And how should I set up my SRS algorithm, etc., etc. But this is a good reminder that however you go about learning, the only algorithm you actually need is the one that says just work pretty hard at it.
I lived in Japan for 9 years. That's obviously a tremendous advantage. I've said many times, the more you speak a language, the better you get at speaking it. Within 1 year of arriving in Japan, I was conducting business in Japanese, giving talks in Japanese. I was working at the Canadian Embassy. So I learned it rather quickly. I did it on my own. I didn't go to school. I didn't have a tutor. I just listened and read a lot.
So yes, he had the opportunities, and yes, he worked really hard, but a lot of people say that they work hard at learning a language, often for years, and yet never get any results. So let's get down to brass tacks. Steve, when you are learning these languages in France, Hong Kong, or Japan, what are you actually doing? As someone once said, what is your secret? It's Duolingo, isn't it?
There's only one rule. I'm more and more convinced of this. Do what you like doing. So, in my case, it's listening and reading to things of interest and occasionally taking a break from it to review words and phrases. And slowly, when I get the urge, occasionally here and there, speaking to people in the language.
Now, just in case you were momentarily distracted by a squirrel, let's underscore what was just said. Do what you like doing. But wait a minute, that's not a method. What's he on about? Well, think of the overarching concept. Do what you like doing. If you like what you're doing, you'll do more of it. And then you'll learn. So this is something important to think about in your own learning. Is the way that you learn in alignment with what you actually enjoy? If you love reading books, then why are you trying to learn with apps? If you get all your motivation from speaking with people, shouldn't you be finding more opportunities to speak? This is a lot about making sure you're in alignment with yourself. Trouble is, a lot of people, especially if they're new to language learning, don't know what they like doing. And even if they do know what they like, watching movies, for example, then it doesn't necessarily work. And so they'd happily do something different if it helped them learn a language faster. So the key then is finding something that you enjoy and that also happens to work. In Steve's case, it is this: listening and reading to things of interest, occasionally reviewing words and phrases, and then slowly starting to speak to people. Now, remember this?
I've learned more languages in the last 15 years than I learned up to the age of 60.
Now this is where I think we have a lot to learn from Steve. So after living in France, Hong Kong and Japan, Steve goes back to Canada and starts learning languages really at a rate of knots from home. Over a dozen of these languages. And how do we know this to be true? Well, Steve openly records videos of him speaking those languages.
ですね、もちろん、その外国語を勉強するときに、慢慢地习惯一个新的语言。
A étudier, a écouter, a lire, enfin, à faire tout ce qu'il faut pour apprendre des langues. Porque hace mucho tiempo que yo no hablo español.
Розумієте, не розумію. І я вирішив вивчати українську мову.
And if you've been watching this video so far thinking, well, it's all right for Steve getting sent all around the world to learn languages, I don't have that opportunity. Well, now he's learning languages from home, and that's something that you can do. And luckily for all of us, Steve has dedicated the last 10 years to talking about exactly how he goes about it. And this is it. When Steve starts a new language, he does not go to a textbook. He's not interested in studying about the language, grammar and so on. Instead, he wants to go to the source. And as we've already seen, for him, that is reading and listening to stuff in the language. What does he read and listen to? Mini stories.
I find the mini stories really useful. That's how I learn the language. And when I go to refresh, I go right back to the mini stories. To me, it's like your core exercises in the gym. Like that's your core.
So yes, Steve wants to learn how to speak his target languages, but that's not where he starts. He believes that you can learn to speak more easily by first doing lots of listening and reading. And he uses these very simple mini stories that he's developed for his language learning platform called Link, which I can highly recommend, and you can find an affiliate link below in the description. After learning the basics, he'll then start listening more widely to the language.
I will listen to something for 15, 20 minutes while I make my fruit salad. I prepare some fruit salad, some muesli or whatever it might be, That's 20 minutes. So I'm listening. And I'll find 20 minutes I clean up after breakfast. During the day, I will typically work out. So there's another half hour a day of listening. And if I'm in the car going somewhere, I easily get in an hour of listening every day.
Now, that hour a day he spends on listening, he's fitting that in and around his other habits and activities. So right away, this is something that you can be thinking about. How much dead time do you have in your day that you can dedicate to just listening? Because it all adds up over the weeks and months.
It's listening and reading to things of interest and occasionally taking a break from it to review words and phrases.
So you'll miss that if you weren't paying attention. The two key bits from this are review words and phrases and occasionally. Here's why. The basic principle of Steve's method is that if you can spend enough time reading and listening, you'll learn. But it's not enough by itself. There are people who say that deliberate study doesn't help and that all you need to do is to listen and read. But most serious dedicated language learners that I know do believe that some more traditional study is helpful. What Steve mentioned here is reviewing words and phrases. So basically, if you've discovered a new word or phrase somewhere, then it can be helpful to review that word or phrase in some way. Now, some people do this with flashcards, some people just write lists out on a piece of paper. Steve, in his case, he's not a fan of any particular vocabulary review method, but he does recognize the value of that process and does it very sparingly, occasionally, from time to time, and most definitely not what most people end up doing if they're not paying attention, which is to end up spending all their time banging away on flashcards at the expense of the input. The input is where it's at, and it should be 80, 90, 95% of your time.
When you need to use the language, when you need to speak more, if you have a large passive vocabulary, you will be able to speak. It'll come quite quickly. But there again, it'll be something that you want to do. So if you want to speak early, speak. If you don't want to speak early, don't worry about it.
Now, one of the more hotly debated issues in the polyglot world is when to start speaking. Some people advocate speaking from day one. Others say you should wait until you feel ready to speak. And as we talked about earlier, Steve's thing is to get lots and lots of input first and then starting to speak later when you have lots of the language already inside you. But one of the things I appreciate about Steve is that he's not dogmatic about one method that just works. He thinks about language learning in a very holistic sense. How does it make your life better?
The most important thing is it fun? Do you enjoy doing it? Everything can work if you enjoy doing it.
If you watch a lot of online polyglot videos, you would be forgiven for thinking that it's all about kind of bragging and hyperbole. I used this one trick to learn fluent French in 30 days. Well, you'll never hear that from Steve. In fact, you'll hear the exact opposite.
Don't compete with others. I'm not competing with other people in my challenge. I'm not comparing myself to others. Some people are going faster. Some people are going to pronounce better. Some people are going to learn faster, slower, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm learning it for myself. So I'm not competing. That reduces the stress level. Anything that reduces the stress level makes learning more enjoyable, makes learning more effective.
And I think this is what real experience, genuine experience, teaches you. In the end, none of this stuff matters. So you may as well do what makes you happy. And it's worth taking this to heart if you're someone who spends a little bit too much time on YouTube comparing yourself to others. And as for the endless YouTube debates about, who speaks the best language and who's the best guru and all of that nonsense, well, Steve's got a very clear philosophy.
If I were hung up on taking my Japanese to a higher level, I would be forever perfecting my Japanese. So I would never have explored Greek, Romanian, not to mention I'm having a ball with Arabic. It's all exploring. So I never worry about, I made the choice. I would rather explore more rather than try to perfect what I already have.
Now, it is funny, when you learn as many languages as Steve has, there are certain problems that come with that. And in this video, you will discover what those problems are. Strange problems, unexpected problems, infuriating problems. Click this video over here and you'll see what I mean.